So, yeah, thank you for joining us this morning, Pete, and obviously for bringing your dissertation. You probably felt rushed to the back end in that, but as I said, you talked this stuff all day if you were given a platform to do it from. Officers, before I go to council, is any further, or did you have anything else you wanted to add to your presentation?
No, not at all. Not at all. I know there's a lot in it, and we're going to meet up anyway afterwards and tell your team a bit more detail.
Angela, anything you'd like to tease out in front of councillors, or point out, or extrapolate, or?
Not at this stage. Thanks,
Kyle?
No, thank you.
Great. Councillors?
No.
So Matt, I think the dinosaur stuff is like a definite new market opportunity. One thing that this council has done now for quite some time is look at redefining what a tourist to our region is and looks like. By investing pretty substantially in the recreation lake here in Barcaldine. We've targeted summer months for a start for tourists, and some wouldn't classically define a visitor from, say, Emerald or Roma or Blackall with a ski boat a tourist, but in literal definition, that's exactly what they are. They're going to increase overnight stays in our communities. They're going to invest in our pubs, and there's the opportunity for new business to be established in the community, you know, that hires the equipment or actually just sells it. A users group meeting recently identified simple things like purchasing life jackets and stand-up paddleboarding equipment and water-based equipment. You can't do that in the Central West. Certainly can't do it in Barcaldine. So whether it be a shop of opportunity for a start, field day, like at West Tech or at the Ag Show, someone brings that out, and then if it's a market that takes off, possibility for this community to see a business expansion, and it's directly related to a non-traditional, non-core, but it's not in any way competing with what is the traditional, because it's happened effectively for the 5 foot months that we aren't overwhelmed with, you know, through that summer. So we see that, and there's no disconnection from existing tourist attractions like skiing at Lake Dunn. It actually only adds to what's there, and skiing on the Thompson River, and the potential's there to have a Central West water skiing circuit, with events held.
See, that's an awesome idea.
And it can actually probably happen without a lot of legwork from the local government, but we can piggyback in on that.
It's just somebody bringing it to life, which we can do with you, and then we add it into the itinerary. So then we attack a whole different market that's never been approached before. Attack's the wrong word. Approached before.
Yeah. So we obviously yet to see how that plays out. And, the opening of that facility will be now later in the year. It was originally scheduled for May Day, but we postponed just for a number of little things we want to get finished there and tidied up. But I guess like thinking outside the square. So the dinosaurs is what is a thought outside the square. Well, it's not actually that outside the square. It's just promoting that into a
Realising potential is what.
Yeah, and we think that things like the Rec Park have got that same potential in a totally different, non-competing fashion to attract. And if you then couple that with the opportunities at Wamprata and the Outback experience, is the opportunity for kids to, as part of their Outback experience, a constantly filled water that doesn't need rain, like it's not drought dependent or drought. So there's just that little bit more that could be tied into that Wamprata experience if they were here in our communities. And, opportunities to be the only Royal Surf Lifesaving Club not on a coastal area exists, have nippers that could benefit the whole of the Central West in terms of that, but it's a marketing thing, and the tourists getting their photo taken with the red and yellow caps on the beach at Barcaldine,
I love it.
I love it too.
There's possibilities.
It's got great storytelling.
Mr. Mayor, Paul had just sent through photos of the Mudborosaurus interpretation centre. So those installations are going in today and possibly finished by Friday.
It's very good.
Good time.
So that will be
Mark had a paint too, didn't he? Didn't he Monobarosaurus a girl or a boy? I don't know. I think
It's
you
gender
got it.
equality base as well that we're living now, Matt, perhaps it's gender neutral.
Okay,
Do you know?
apologies.
I have no idea, I'm very facetious. And I'll probably get in trouble with the media next week as a result of my facetious, so I should have shut up. But realistically, I don't know. But did you get an overhaul with paint? Paul, are you online? Did we paint Dino?
Sorry?
Did Dino get a lick of paint before it was installed inside the interpretation centre?
I'm not sure about that, Mr. Mayor. I don't think so. He looks pretty good still though.
And by your use of the vernacular there, he, I'm assuming Dino is male.
Well, there's probably no proof of that.
If I wasn't in open meeting, I'd have some comments
Very
around
sorry.
human marketing opportunity for our dinosaur brand, so I'll refrain. Okay, thank you. Good news on the construction front. So yeah, I think there's stuff that, and I think this goes to probably both elements. You know, there's only so much local government can do. Product development does obviously take some coordination and assistance and help, but it's, the point you made earlier is they've got to want to be on the journey as private providers. Obviously things like the Mudborough Interpretation Centre is fully funded by council. However, the vast majority of our attractions, including things like the Dr. Arata Museum in that community, or the Lake Gun Sculpture Trail, or the Workers Heritage Centre, or the Cultural Museum, or Red Bank in Jericho, or the drive-in, or the murals in Alpha, or they're actually predominantly privately owned, publicly. So our ability to directly control that is limited to a support base. Whereas if we can provide opportunities through funding of things like, you know, in the past we've coordinated very significant events like the Harry Redford Cattle Drive, which offer that unique experience, and nothing lasts forever. Change is probably a good thing because people can't repeat it. Who knows, there may or may not be another Harry Redford Cattle Drive, but there could be the opportunity for something else that's truly unique in that space to take it, and council would gladly support it, but it takes drive from outside, you know.
Mr. Mayor, during last year, during lockdown, we did have a number of consumers contact us asking us if there would be another cattle drive in the outback, and it always comes back to how successful that was from a PR point of view, the Harry Redford Cattle Drive. And I was around at the time that it was being run, and I know that it was a huge amount of effort. So these things don't come easily, and I suspect that 17 years ago, translated to now, there's a whole heap more impediments and insurance issues and a whole range of difficulties. But, you know, those big signature events are really good, and I think the time is right for nostalgia. I think the time is right to bring people back. People are looking for real life experiences. People are looking to take their kids on real life experiences, get them off the grid, take them on experiences and journeys that they can see where their meat on their plate comes from, those sorts of things. So it doesn't need to be a Harry Redford Cattle Drive, but those sorts of things are awesome for developing the future traveller of tomorrow.
Yeah, well, COVID stymied another plan last year for the Drovers reunion, the Redford reunion. Would have been 20 years since the first one. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was 20 or 21 actually.
Outback, year of the Outback, wasn't it?
2002
Mm-hmm.
was the year of the Apple. That's
So was that the first one?
That was the first one.
So yeah, well that'll make it 19 years now. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Any further observations, councillors? I mean, yeah, this is something we need to watch, but you know, and I've overlooked a number of other private operations. I mean, you've got Trackers Tours, and you've got the work that you saw launched last year, and there's a number of opportunities still that haven't been realised, and a few further things under development within our area that will add to that experience, and they don't always come across in that package, but they really are. They contribute to what it is that we've got on the ground, and we're going to face a challenging infrastructure spending environment. There's plenty of money around right now, but there's not anyone to do the work. And in a few years, there'll be everyone around to do the work and no money to spend. So it's about trying to find the middle ground on that over the next 24 to 48 months. Because when it stops, the advice from every level of government is just going to, the tap will be turned off completely. And in infrastructure space, and so we're going to have to make sure that our decisions around that are wise, because we have competing interests as well. We've got footpaths that need building and roads that need bitumen, but yeah, let's hope that we can enhance the economic development in the area through tourism initiatives like the dinosaurs and the Breck Park, for example.
Are your ratepayers happy with tourism? I mean, we're getting good feedback from them, but are you getting that feedback that they're happy with the tourism numbers, their forward bookings, the season ahead?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit sporadic still yet. I think I've never seen so much optimism, which concerns me. False, you know, it's a bit like the Weather Bureau, eh? They promise the world and deliver nothing, or deliver an atlas. So I'm hoping the tourism season is delivered to the expectations, because local businesses are ramped right up. Those in expectation, they're concerned about delivery within their own capacity, but yeah, I hope the numbers eventuate, and we're seeing some already, you know, so it probably is going to, but the sense of optimism is extremely high. I don't know, officers probably interact a bit too on that level. Any feedback from businesses?
Not from businesses, but I have received probably twice as many requests for info as normal. And most of it's fairly early in the season.
It's good. Excellent.
And any business that is in the forecasting space with bookable, online bookable packaging and the travel trade are showing good forward bookings. So there's good signals from those more mature businesses in their forward bookings. It's just the ones that are relying on the sort of road traffic to turn up, as opposed to being out there and promoting themselves in advance of that will probably be looking down the highway come Easter and hoping.
They're all ready.
Yeah.
I mean, there is some bookable product, obviously, in the council area. There's a significant percentage of our tourism initiatives that rely on the itinerary. You know, the opportunistic traveller. But you know, we've got the Lara wetlands and Shandon Vale. You know, there are certainly bookable experiences, but you wouldn't think they're in the majority. You certainly wouldn't have them in the majority. So, yeah.
Right, all understood. I think all indications are pointing to a good year. Not to be a weatherman, but I think it's looking all right until we see a significant increase in outbound holidays again overseas from Aussies. We should be all right, but as soon as overseas opens and everyone's running around with their protection jabbed into their arms, we'll see it shifting.
And I think the cruise market will be a significant competitor as well for our market. You know, even though we've had a significant growth in families and, you know, younger children market, our grey nomads, the number of them that I've spoken to in the last, 6 weeks that are saying, we can't wait to go on another cruise, which is extraordinary because 6 months ago, none of them wanted to go on a cruise. But now the vaccination's giving a lot of confidence.
I think my assessment on that is that this is the opportunity to make hay while the sun shines, for sure, and there will always be that quick correction when it's available. But if the tourism initiatives in the regions do a good enough job of imprinting what's here, the water finds its own level. So yes, there might be a gross correction, as you said before, overseas, but if they realise what they can achieve out of it, so that right now is the audition for not maybe a 3 to 4 year plan, but the audition for what could be in the 8 to 10 year package of people who do that rush back overseas. And yeah, so, and I mean, I wouldn't imagine that overseas travel immediately is going to be that cheap. I mean, you're going to have limited number of flights for a start, so you'll have competition for that. Qantas will want to drive that competition to restore their profit margin.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah, all those things.
But yeah, I just think this 12-month tourist season, whether it's a private tourism operator or this is their audition. Last year was just to get out of jail free for people. This year's
That's dead right.
they're planning a holiday now. Before it was reactive, get out of New South Wales, get out of Victoria. Where do you go? You had to come to Queensland. So when we were allowed out. So that we're now competing with those three.
Yeah, the territory's turned up the heat in the last fortnight. I've
Mm,
noticed.
it has.
Yeah.
Mm.
So,
Very much.
I agree. So anything communities can do to be the beautiful, welcoming communities that we know them, that's going to be the best sales tool for repeat visitation. Because that's the warmth that people are looking for. So it's not just the tourism operator, it's everyone in your community that plays a role when they do get here.
Have you seen this? Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Just those street corner conversations as well, if you can try and get as many of your community greeting tourists and saying, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing that? Might be worthwhile. You know, Brisbane greeters are so visual. In Brisbane, you walk up to them and say, I've actually done it just as a bit of mystery shopping. You walk up to them and say, well, I'm here for a day, what should I go and see? Oh, I should go for this, this and this and this. It's be good for you to have some of those sort of people that are around town that are going to be outside the bakery, that when a tourist walks in the door, they go, hey, how long are you here for? Can you go and have a look at such and such? Don't miss.
Yeah. Should be interesting. I know it's hard to get there. Looking forward, some of the work trips that are coming up, it's hard to find rooms in certain towns already.
So,
Sorry,
you go.
Mr. Mayor, when you're saying people to do that, are you talking about employed people?
Volunteers.
So I know that when I've been to Charters Cows, they've got the town crier dressed up in the street, like dressed up as a town crier and going up and down telling people what to do. I'm not sure if that's voluntary or whether it's paid, but
I've no
You
idea.
don't pay me to dress up in a
yeah.
They've had him for a while.
Yeah, he has been around for a while.
He could be just one of those characters that does it out of love for his town, I'm not sure. I've seen him.
Yeah.
But you've got those people in your communities.
Yeah.
Old Stewie that rides his horse along the river down there in Blackall, riding up to people camping. He gives them his opinions, right or wrong,
Yeah.
but they love it. They love that sort of open conversation. I
Our
suppose.
mate in Longreach that rides the bull,
Oh, hawks.
Hawksy, you know, though if you can just create a little point of difference, that you've got somebody that will give you that point of difference.
Just little things that help create word of mouth. So Peak Services coordinate the long drive for drought. I don't know if you're
She
familiar
rang
with
this
that.
morning.
Yeah, so it's visiting through this region.
Yeah.
I think the 30th of August, it'll be overnight in Jericho and then through Ilfracombe and then back down Blackall Tembo. So, you know, it's not a car rally effectively, but yeah, they're overnight in one of our communities and they get to see a bit, and you would hope then, and you see those opportunities that they, all come back like their group of cars raising funds, and then next thing they're back with their family if they see something they like and spend some time. So, yeah, those sort of things. And that's something that's easy for council to support because we see the future growth out of it. It's a one-off thing. Community group will probably do most of the work anyway in terms of meals and so forth. So.
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions or comments from Denise and Matt? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Tomorrow.
Thank you.
Not tomorrow, sorry. I'll see you on Friday.
We're here today, and tonight, and then up to Longreach, over to Longreach, and then we've got obviously you guys for the round table. It's a shame that Minister Hinchliff was unable to come through here.
Yeah, well, that was the original itinerary.
Yeah, I know, but he's
So you must
flying
be
in there.
flying here.
He's coming in on Friday plane now, so we'll sort of have a bit of a lunch and he should get to the hall by 12:30. So.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. See you then.
Thank you,
Awesome.
everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
See you.
thank you. Thank you.
I won't run around to us hands.
Okay, see you. 3 days.
Okay, I would like to just continue in the order of our agenda because Councillor, as I said earlier, Councillor Hanson will be looking to join us and to save the repetition of the report. With Council's indulgence, we'll come back to this, please. Officers, no problem with that?
This one?
Yeah. So if we can, stay there, please. We can move to 3, 4, 1, please. Somebody move the CEO's report be received. Councillor Peoples, seconded. Councillor Plum, those in favour. Carried. 6-0. Have you got anything you'd like to highlight?
Probably just the main thing is that we've had 3 different organisations come up and either inspect us or carry out audits on our safety systems. And they've all been very glowing in their praise about the improvements that we've made over the last year and that we're on the right track in terms of our safety management performance. So I think that's a credit to our safety officer, tech officers, as well as our staff on the ground that are actually implementing the controls that we need to have implemented in order to ensure their own safety at work. Apart from that, I'll take it as read.
Councillors, questions?
Through Mr. Mayor,
Councillor Gillespie.
the maintenance supervisors at Alpha, are we short of one right now at the moment, or is it just an overlap with the maintenance supervisor? Has somebody left the job and we're called for another job immediately?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we had a maintenance supervisor leave last year, at least 12 months ago. We're trying to recruit, haven't been able to recruit. We have had multiple people gone temporarily through logo appointments. We're chasing another one now, logo appointments, and we can't find them.
Thank you.
Three, 5, 4, 2, sorry, 3, 4, 2. Will you please move that we receive the councillor information correspondence? Councillor Arthur, seconded Councillor Plum. Those in favour? 0. Just a observation, we applied for the funding from the Mental Health and Wellbeing one-off grant for the head yakka.
Yes, we did.
Good. Given it was specifically designed for head yakka, I trust there'll be no problem getting that funding. It was actually referenced in the initiative, so
This is the 75,000.
it's one-off. The intent or lobbying approach is certainly to hope that it becomes a set. One-off things aren't much use, but they're a good way to get started.
Yeah, no, I just didn't mind look at point 2 there too, where you can revitalise your local economies through the employment of an economic development officer.
Yep.
That's something we've been calling for some time.
Part 2 is the only other, is the rapid council that's not putting it towards head yakka, they're doing that. Buckingham, Buckingham, Longreach, the rest are all ones that have advised by rapid what they're doing with it, are going to create it, which will help anyone who's doing it because cumulatively it allows the program to, $75,000 from one council funds that, but it's point something of a position to do that. So if there's a couple of councils, it allows for joint procurement within the program.
So there's several councils putting their 75,000 towards head yakka.
All of the other rapid councils I'm aware of except Barclay. Which means the rollout will be a bit more regionalised and beefs up the amount of resources available to help do that. So the additional costs that councils might incur could be offset significantly by the fact that there's more than one council undertaking the project. They'll be tailored differently in each community because the point of PEDYACA is for the community to decide the form that it takes, but the personnel engaged will be able to facilitate a lot of the crossover activities.
Wasn't there originally no cost to council for PEDYACA?
That's a question. No, I can't. Oh, it was not my recollection, but
What's your recollection, Brad?
It was definitely budgeted.
Was it?
But
For this financial year, yes.
This, yeah.
and one off, each proposal came to council for a body of work that they were doing. But we had budgeted for this 75,000 without really knowing whether we were getting it or not, but we sort of half promised that we were going to get that funding.
So actually now that, that 450,000 goes to PEDYACA.
how much, sorry?
Well, if you've got 6 councils hitting 75,
Yeah, it's not a joint procurement though. It'll go directly, individually from each council. It won't go through a joint procurement process.
that's, if each council gives their 75, there's 450,000.
That's right. Any other questions? That in there is the Hotel Energy Uplift Program is the one I referred to at the start. Rural land valuations or revaluations and rates correspondence from actuals will probably form part or elements of that. Form conversations with the Valuer General shortly. You all would have received independently that letter anyway, did you, on email? It was copied from actuals to you. And probably the other point, in case you've overlooked it, to be very clear about is the Works for Queensland funding. You will note that that figure is a consistent figure with what we normally receive, 1,120,000. However, the period of time that it's relevant to is substantially longer. So it's not $1,120,000 per financial year for those 3 years. It is an allocation of $1,120,000 to cover those 3 years. So if council allocates all of its projects, all of its funding for projects in the first financial year, there is no more. That's it. And yet, we have to have submitted the projects by the 9th of April, which is before we even hand out the budget. So our next budget workshop will be critical, just like the first 3 have been, to getting LRCIP funding allocated to where we want it to go. We now have to do the same thing. Even if we don't intend to do the project in the next financial year, we have to have identified what it is by the 30th of March this year, or for submission by the 9th of April. So that's a strategically unique position we'll be in. We'll be making a funding decision that's got to cover 3 years worth of expenditure. On the flip side of that is the good news that we've actually got 3 years to get it done. So it doesn't become a time sensitive thing. Like everything else at the moment, it seems like that if Rick hears 30 June one more time, we're going to wear earplugs to work. The amount of funding things that we have that are locked to a 30 June deadline or 31 December 21 deadline is immense. At least this here gives us the option to choose projects that may take some longer period of time. Whether they're started immediately or not is also not even relevant, so long as it's quitted by 30th of June 24, which is fairly long time, like.
How will it be starting to turn off?
Well, I suggest it might be going into more discretionary type grants if they are going to put it into anything, because
But that's been a yearly allocation to sort of
2 years.
2 years.
Now we're going out to 3.
But that was always the election promise. Everyone knew before the election that it was going to be over 3 years. And I did raise the timing with Joanne Murrow, Department of Local Government. When I met her the other day, that, yeah, it's unfair for us to have to get costings and know which projects we're going to do in the next 3 years by the 9th of April.
Because one of the preconditions of Works for Queensland funding is it can't be for projects that are already in your budget. So if we'd already done the work on a particular project, we couldn't get it funded anyway. It's obviously for newly identified projects to generate employment opportunities. I mean, that's essentially the mission statement for Works for Queensland, is to stimulate councils to spend money on something that generates employment and wasn't scheduled to already happen. The other good thing about it is, as I said in our budget workshops, Works for Queensland terms and conditions have changed to now allow maintenance. Previously it did not. The last round it did. I think this will be the second round that they delivered with that changed condition.
When you say maintenance, Sean, on what? Including roads?
Yeah. Roads, water and sewage assets,
Okay.
footpaths, town halls, toilet blocks. So the next budget workshop on the 30th will be critical for where we're spending that 1.12. And if we come to an agreement that's, we'll have to ratify those. And if it's a difficult decision or becomes difficult, we may have to convene a special meeting for early April to confirm that before submission. If there's contentious within council, if we find issues that are contentious on that list, we'll have a special meeting together so the officers know that they're acting with authority. But, as I say, we're going to have to be wedged between the 30th and the 9th. But there would be time to give notice for a special meeting. We only need 3 days to clear that. Well, even if it was a week, even if it's 7 days, there's still time. All right, any other questions? None? 351, can somebody move the Deputy Chief Executive Officer's report be received? Councillor Gleeson, seconded. Councillor Arthur, those in favour? Councillor Peebles?
Sorry.
Carried. 6-0. Brendan, anything you'd like to point out?
Mr Mayor, I collected the Aramac SES vehicle from the Rockhampton Mayor. I was in Rockhampton for personal reasons, and so we had a handover. So I appreciate that, even though we had to pay some money towards it, we got a fairly good vehicle. For the Aramac SES. The broadband, we still haven't heard, Mr Mayor, on whether that funding's been approved. So that's imminent apparently. So it's the QCN fibre for Aramac and the NBN connections for Alpha. Well, we thought they were going to be announced last week.
QCN were extremely optimistic about their application for Aramac. They believe that is within the ideals. There was $9 billion worth of projects submitted for $100 million worth of funding. I'll say those B's and M's again for you. There was $9 billion worth of funding requested from a bucket that had 100 million. It was somewhat oversubscribed. So if little old Alpha and little old Aramac get funded, there was a significant portion, around 6 billion of them applications, roughly, were for mobile black spot, which is completely outside the scope of that. They've attempted to throw in there. I would suspect that they will all instantly be dismissed. So that still leaves you with about $3 billion to spend over $100 million. Other way around, $100 million to spend over $3 billion worth of work. Anyway, we will wait and see. Any questions for Brett?
Through you, Mr Mayor, can I don't know if I can ask this or we need to go into close, but meeting with potential developer.
Is that for?
It's on page 31, second topic.
So Mr Mayor, that was the land that council had set aside for the truck stop. Highway. There's another developer who may be interested. So, we met with him. That was just an information meeting. We'll see whether it takes them any further or not.
All right, and the next one?
And we did, sorry, Mr Mayor, we included the gun club, so there's a representative of the gun club there, so they were aware of what was happening.
The next point you got there, Bill? The next point, Mike?
The internship.
QUT.
Yeah.
Mayor, the QUT put a proposal, it was a Zoom meeting about a PhD internship. They've withdrawn that since I've written this report. So they were looking at someone coming out and doing another planning workshop about what communities need. Basically, we've done so many of those.
Yeah.
We actually want someone to actually do the work, not just.
So the advice from the Government Relations Officer on that is that it was a little bit broad in scope and not relevant. So they sort of decided that they wouldn't continue at this stage.
Through you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor, please.
Investigator trustee lease for industrial unit Marlborough. What's a trustee lease?
So where council owns reserved land, or we're the trustee for the land, so the town commons are actually reserves, which are owned by the state government. We're the trustee for the land. So if we want to lease any of that land, it's called a trustee lease. So this is the land that council's identified to freehold and purchase from the state between the town, Marlborough town and the racecourse, just next to the campground. But this developer wants the freeholding's going to take at least 18 months, but you can't wait that long. So we've been advised that a trustee lease is the best way to go about that.
You got a developer interest in doing something?
The root boxes.
Oh,
So we'll have to advertise that publicly, because we can't just give it to one person. We'll have to go through a tender process in case that there are other people who want that land.
Mr Mayor, is it an appropriate time to ask the question about a couple of days ago we got an email to do with the ABC and Waratah Coal interviews, that sort of thing? Is it an appropriate time for you to explain what that was
So
about?
that's just a request. It's a right to information request, and they want to know the things that were outlined to you in that email. Whether you've met with them, when you've met with them. So I just want to remind councillors, I think some may have responded, none ever, but quite a significant number of you did participate in the community engagement Zoom conference that was held between Waratah and council. Some of you are in this room. I was with the representatives in Alpha.
Well, Mr Mayor, that was going to be one of my questions on the subject, that do we need to declare something that happened in public we've got to have it itemised. Yep.
So I've submitted my list on that already to the CEO. So it's still in its development, whether they may not proceed because the costs to them to procure that could be too high. So first of all, you've got to do a discovery search, quote back to the RTI recipient, what it is, and then they decide whether they choose to proceed or not, because it comes at a cost to them, obviously, for us to procure the documents.
So did we all get this email, didn't we?
Yep.
And you said it incorrectly.
I thought you.
I would have answered that incorrectly. Because I was in this meeting in this room.
Yeah. So nothing's been submitted. That's just an exploratory. We're just trying to get a handle, Breeders, on the volume of information that needs to be compiled to estimate back to the individual involved what that price will be, and then they decide whether they want to do it or not.
Yeah, rights information have to pay an hourly rate plus so much per page of documents. So I need to give them a quote of what I think, how long it's going to take and how many pages I'm going to have to send.
So Mr Mayor, it's more so a price for information. It's not a free right to it. I didn't know that.
You're only paying for the government set the fees.
Yeah.
You're only paying what the reasonable cost to procure that information is. Otherwise, you get every frivolous complaint under the. Yeah, and it's got to be legitimate. It comes at a cost to us to procure that.
The first 5 hours are free. So
Oh, okay.
if there's a
Okay.
smaller request that takes less than 5 hours, there's no charge.
Who sent the email?
Me.
Sunday the 14th, Mr Mayor, was the email.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you can plumb your exit.
And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, we can discuss that request offline.
Thank you.
Planning and development report. Can somebody use that, please? Be received. Councillor Gleeson, seconder.
Do we want Councillor Plum left the building before
Yes.
we?
That's right. Sorry, we'll pick up.
Yes, feel free,
Yeah,
Councillor
share.
Plum.
Councillor Plum left at 11:21. Seconder. Motion lapses for one second, so we move to three.
I have my hand up.
Sorry, Councillor Rogers, thank you.
That's why I didn't put my hand up.
Yeah. Those in favour? Carried. 5-0. I'm in trouble as it is for not looking sideways often enough. To make sure I look hard. Sorry, Councillor. Questions? I've got one. It referenced in this under 1.11, the development application for a premises. I don't need to name it; it's not relevant. Is a extension, and further in the second paragraph, there's reference to the need for separation in respect to meeting current requirements for fire prevention. Building surveyor highly recommended that the storage area be detached by a minimum of 3 metres from any other structure or separating fire will be installed. This advice comes forward to the applicant for consideration, no response, whatever. So that's not the bit that I question, or not. It's just an observation. I've noted a significant number of these, both in our reporting and in reporting direct from proponents. Has the standard or the code changed, or is it the interpretation of our officers that's changed? Because there is a community group in Aramac who've undertaken building works, exactly the same feedback. A business, a separate business here in Buckhalden, the one referenced here, that same advice. So has that been a change in standards, or is it an awareness and activity that's been undertaken by our
3 metre rule.
Yeah.
It's been in for a long time.
Okay.
It's probably just people have been made aware of it
Okay.
more publicly.
But, you know, in this instance here, through you, Mr Mayor, I think you're looking at building story, am I right in saying that?
Yeah, we're just in open meeting, councillor, and so
Yeah.
just don't reference the name, it's all
Yeah.
warning about there.
But you know, if you want to build a storeroom, you probably want it close to your work as possible, not have to build 3 metres and a separate standalone building away from your existing building. It just makes things a little unworkable. Could be a lot easier. I understand that it's building code, but I think, I don't know how we can change it. Maybe we need to make some sort of submission to the building code about how this isn't really working for some of what these applications are.
Who sets that?
State government.
Which agency? We won't be able to give answers today, council, that's why I raised it. Let's just look into the
Let's look
situation.
into how we can probably help some of these applicants and
And maybe there is nothing that can be done, but we'll at least have a better understanding, because that's the third request. That's the third time I've seen that now, or been made aware of that in the last 6 months.
yeah.
Could just mean that there's more development underway than there was in the 36 months prior to that too. Any questions further to the planning and development report? Oh, I do. The application title 114. Can I move? I would like to discuss this in detail, and probably there would be sensitive, possibly discussions that might arise. On what basis can I close? It's limited, I know. Commercial matters, probably. It does, it's a street closure. Okay, I'll stay in open session. The applicant here has met with council and it's outlined there a meeting that was held, but there was a subsequent meeting held that I was part of, as well as Brett and Anna, regarding traffic impact assessment, and the applicant requested advice from council whether council would close Lampswood Drive, where it intersects with the Capricorn Highway on the bend of Oak Street. So, just on this side of the railway line, the dirt exit there. We provide any advice as to what might happen back to that applicant.
The applicant has to provide a traffic impact assessment. That's their responsibility. That's the advice we've given. They have to engage their own consultant to prepare that assessment.
Which I think the proponent provided advice that they have done that. I just can't recall the name of the company, but they did mention it.
They were working with a consultant to prepare that. So there's two traffic impacts assessment, one for the state government because it affects the Capricorn Highway, and one for council.
Correct. The applicant's concern was that due to the traffic, it's a significant impact assessment potentially on the Cap Highway. If council would consider the closure of that street, then it would significantly reduce the assessments. And if we determined to make any recommendations to council around that may better guide that traffic impact assessment for SARA.
We went back to Department of Main Roads, and they had, back when we put the fencing in that area, there was a ruling on that. Now that intersection, if you go there, there's no entry sign coming from the east, which means it's closed, you cannot enter as you come over the development line. If you're coming from the west, it's a double white line, so you can't cross that. So it effectively is closed to traffic. The only traffic that can use it if you're coming from Landswood, turning west onto the Cap Highway, is the only, should only be one-way traffic.
I haven't formed an opinion because it hasn't been a recommendation come to council about it, but I do know that she raised it repeatedly in that meeting where the council would consider it because it would have a impact on her traffic impact assessment if there was no road vehicle access to the Cap Highway. It actually eliminates SARA's, completely eliminates the need for SARA to be involved, which would save her substantially on that PIA. Like half of it.
So, Mr Mayor, we've applied to Main Roads to upgrade the drain on the corner of Mile and Cap Highway. And they've agreed to fund that in the next financial year, which means traffic can get around by Mile, Plum, Jacaranda onto Landswood.
Yep. And if so, will that then leave consideration for council as to whether we do close the road?
Through to Mr Mayor, that application was Mile and Plum drainage,
So
not the highway.
So it's up to council whether we want to proceed down that path because it's such a public road. Yeah, I think.
Could we get it right with you later on, show us what you're talking about?
Yeah, I guess the gist of my approach here is that we can't consider it unless it's addended. If there is a serious conceptual opportunity here that could, and I, as a saying at the outset, I'm just facilitating the process. I have not, dead set, not formed an opinion of it. Obviously, consultation will be required not only with the developer in this case, but road users generally in the Buckhorn area. So I can take everyone for a drive and show you, or put a map on the screen and show you. But yeah, if that's something that officers and communication with the proponent around that, because I believe the proponent's still unsure as to whether what, and if council has no intention of bringing that as a recommendation for consideration, will the proponent then would know, well, I have to prepare a traffic impact assessment or I can hold off. I just think if we can,
They would still have to do a traffic impact assessment
Well,
because they're accessing the Cap Highway at some point. The traffic will have to.
so there's not setback arrangements that affect that. For example, Waratah don't have to do that for the Cap Highway. She could argue that her access could come off the leads, but in that case, she's at the whole of Buckhorn to absorb the impact in that case.
I think because Sarah has identified it as an issue, I'll address it. But our recommendation was to the proponent was make your access through via Miles Street to avoid the issue.
Right, well, if we can just follow up with that, because I believe it might be stalling that process. Stalling her response on the information request. Actually, no, stalling the response. Okay, further questions on the report? Councillor Gleeson.
We had a brief discussion about this the other day in the showground users. The buckle and a shed for the racecourse, for the barriers, I'm sorry. The barrier shed for the racecourse, I'm trying to say. Is there a position for that?
Yes, there is, Mr. Mayor. Jenny, you might be able to explain it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is on the northern side, near the okay, so around the back where the tank is, there's a fence across here and there is a gate close down to where they come through for bringing the barriers. And it's on the outside of that fence. I think it will take out one powered campsite that's right at the back near this tank. So yeah, it is in about, the location is just here, up there. So yeah. And that's been approved and I think they're getting ready to start on that, yeah. So if you go right around the back, it's close. There's a lot of equipment on the inside of the fence, so we're about the third panel down from the gate, which sort of gave the clearest access area for them, yeah. It's got roller doors on both ends, and we had to consider where they had sent a map, which was just a rough mud map. You can't get a prime mover, we wouldn't get a prime mover to move on the inside of that fence. That's what had to go on the outside. And it'll run. I will say east-west, but I'll stand to be correct, but yes, I will say it's pretty close east-west with angle, yeah. Am I correct on the direction?
3 ends there. One end of the shed will have be in that fence. So the current fence line of the racetrack, one end of the shed will be on that boundary, and then it'll run perpendicularly away from that fence line. So you can drive straight through.
Yeah. So if it's east-west, you'd be having one end.
Please, if I
It's
may assist the district manager, it's southwest, northeast is what
Yes,
it
I was
is.
going to say that's, yeah, we'll put the up bits on.
Perhaps, Mr. Mayor, if we're going down this road, we have a look at the picture location as well at the same time.
And to the camping issue with that, I've never probably seen anyone camp right down that corner anyway.
Except to the campground.
Hey,
Except to the campground.
for the campground. Sort of camped there myself for the Labor Day weekend, but I've never seen anyone down that intersection.
Thank you.
But there isn't room inside. Rick showed me last week. We didn't even discuss it. I could just see you physically couldn't articulate a road train with one trailer getting from the inside, but offset the way it is, you can drag it out with the tractor or pull it the other, reverse a trailer in there from the southwestern approach.
Mr. Mayor,
Councillor?
thank you. Appreciate what you're saying. I definitely don't want any more room taken up anywhere, but with the rollers and the tractors and all that, that is all inside the racecourse area, isn't it? Why all that's not being moved out as well?
Because there's room to hook all that up inside.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't hook up, they don't hook up to a semi-trailer.
No.
Do you want it taken out?
No.
There's a little bit of area there that you
all
can
that
sort of
sort of
section off on the outside of the racetrack between where that shed's going to be in the tank, if you'd like to make that recommendation.
Thank you. Any simple question?
Councillor, are there any requests or, requests for information or comments?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Rogers? Councillor Peters, any further? Could somebody ask Councillor Plum to rejoin us, please? Can I also move that we receive the Community Care Services Report 253, with Councillor Peters, second Councillor Rogers. Those in favour, receive 6-0, carried 6-0. Comments?
Mr Mayor, the area seems busy as always.
It does.
There's actually, Mr Mayor, a large number of building modifications happening. And the state government gave out a number of smaller grants for people to do home improvements, so Will is busy doing those as well.
Any further comments?
Mr Mayor's regret, have they sort of settled in down there, or are they finding the new?
Mr Mayor, yes, they've, I think they've all moved in, just, the car park, which council approved, it's been done, set in the car park. And we, are just recruiting another staff member, because one of the staff members has moved. So once we get that additional staff member, I'll start the group activities in the hall.
Further? There being none, 354. Somebody move that we receive the economic development report. Councillor Plum, seconded Councillor Rocky. Those in favour? Carried 6-0. Brett? Anything here to lead us through before we go to questions?
That truck stop developments, that's the first item there, which is what we spoke about before. The rec park users have had 2 meetings now, an initial meeting, and last week actually formed the Mark Walden Water Sports Club. So they will, so they've elected a committee, so they can have, look at getting grants and look at what activities they can hold at the rec park. There'll still be a separate planning committee for the rec park, so that's more council and about where we put buildings or what else has got to be put in that area.
I've attended both those meetings. Have been really positive, really proactive. The groups of people are keen to get their ideas on paper about where things could go and provide some feedback into the operational plan development, and very broad cross section of the local community here so far been involved and interested in. Yeah.
And I see, Mr Mayor, we've asked for suggestions for the naming of the rec park as well.
Yeah, I see that too.
Be very interesting.
I thought we had named it, but I see that we're now calling for naming, so no, clearly my recollection wasn't right.
Mr Mayor, I suppose the project down the bottom of the mature projects already, so the Barkey Red is at a stage now where we've got all the legal advice and insurance advice, so we will now have to, we'll need to present that to council, so that they're informed of, you know, what the legalities and the risks and the insurance issues are with that project, and received
So, Brett, that, through you, Mr Mayor, the parking rent, that one is the,
motorbike
motorbike trails
on the common.
on the common.
Yes.
So
Is
we've
that-
just given access to all the common, or what parcel land have they got?
Well, it's not actually a parcel of land, it'll be trails within the parcel of land.
That'd be signed. On that, Brett, is that consistent advice that we would have if we were looking to undertake this activity on Aramac Common or the Alpha Common? So it's advice consistent with not specific only to operate in that event here. If we were to roll it out elsewhere, we could use that same advice.
Yes, Mr Mayor, so I think it's been a good investment, because now for every activity the council conducts, we can use that advice about what you have to put on signs, about risk. So really, that needs to go up on all our, especially our commons, but even with swimming pools and high risk activities.
Jess, your record reflects that 11:45 council minutes in front of me. G'day, councillor, how are you?
Very well. No problem at all. So, Mr Mayor, just go back to being a mature project, have we had the meetings with the common users and everything, now that run cattle and everything, and just say, please bikes can go whenever they like, and with signage? So that's, we've done all that?
No, we haven't had that meeting. What we've had meetings with is the insurance, our insurers and our solicitors. Because we need to get what the legal advice, insurance advice is about what we can do or what we have to do to mitigate the risk. Now we're ready to proceed to the next stage.
So once we've seen the insurers and whatever, we're a mature project, that's, goes with,
Means it can proceed with the decision of council.
right, so that's where the mature comes in, right?
Plan, it's scoped, it's,
Well, is it planned, because we're still talking about here having a meeting with the common users.
yeah, but, I mean, sorry, what is proposed is planned. It's written down as a map, there's a plan you can take and make your decision with, and communicate, and how council chooses to consult on that, at its discretion. Like getting the plans to construct something, it's there, whether we choose to do it or not. So it's mature in the respect that we could make a decision to do it, because we have the advice. Whether how we choose to make the decision and go through it.
I'm just looking at the shovel ready, because every time something comes up and we want to go to funding, whoever's got the shovel ready beside their name gets the funding.
We've already allocated
This is
funding.
already funded.
But we're going to be chasing signage and all that sort of stuff.
No, that's funded
Part-
too.
It's all
part of it.
Yeah. So this is part of the $100,000 funding. So.
And that's all we're going to require.
Well, their initial proposal was funded, costed at 750,000, I believe. Staged, stage one of it. If we put it into the tourism, the growing tourism, we attempted to put it into the tourism infrastructure fund as an entire project, costed it that, was knocked back, or wasn't successful, I should say. So, council elected to just proceed with the minimal stage one to get the concept operational. Which plans, signage, course layout. There's been meetings with the town common users, but there have been meetings between Arrowdale Botanical Gardens committees, and so, because it's planned for coexist in a similar part, so they have met with people behind this project, Morgan and others. So not every stakeholder yet has been consulted. We haven't been really yet.
No, I've just said, I don't really know where it's actually going or where the signs are going or.
So we did get a map of the area when we approved it as a budget submission, but this where the signs are specifically going has been significantly refined since then, but the general area where, because we had a look at how overlapped with the Arabian Botanical Garden. I'll find it before the record.
All right, so where's the botanical gardens going when it's overlapping with them?
Coexisting.
Where?
So you've got your botanical garden maps?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd have to get the maps again for
So we said we're taking that off the common or the botanical garden area?
you. No. Definitely not. We said the reverse. But that's still an area that you can go and walk and have a look at signage. The plots, it doesn't need to be taken off the common to be a.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Gary, the Botanical Gardens and the Barking Redis are working together with the mapping, and so they'll be coexisting, but the actual tracks are going to be designed with the least interference between the two. So, and hopefully be able to coexisting to work together.
There was the one parcel of land, the freehold parcel that we notionally allocated to the gardens. It's not part of the common, it's not the edge of the common.
For their,
Blackwell Road. Yeah.
which was for their, entrance building and
We just allocated a couple of blocks there for an entrance.
one big block of this, and within that we might separate it off they've also got plans for botanical gardens, not only for an entranceway, but for a nursery.
Yeah. I can remember all that happening, but I
Yeah.
never done
And there's a freehold block of land on the Blackwell Road that is immediately adjacent to the area that's been mapped for 30-something years with the subspecies. There's 30 different ecosystems, but 27 or 27, and they all exist in that, spread out from that area. Whereas Barkey Red's, on the common, that's right. Barkey Red's entrance will be via the Rec Park, but it crosses over into that same area.
So the botanical gardens, they're going ahead.
Oh, they formed a committee.
Yeah, I know they formed a committee.
That's for what they're doing. That's literally, there's nothing wrong. The land hasn't, it's just been, our resolution didn't actually gift the land to them. It just stated that we support in principle, and we delegated at that stage for the authority to continue negotiating in the context that there is land there, should it be acquired. So it hasn't even, council still fully owns the land. We just earmarked that that's a possible location for the botanical gardens headquarters should that project see the light of day.
Okay, now just to coexist with the Barkey Red and the botanical gardens was just stated, so I just.
Yeah, not that freehold block, just the area. So the area where they're going to be riding their bikes is in a very similar area to where those 27 ecosystems are. Not a whole lot of them, because the 27 ecosystems covers a massive amount of land. Like it's very spread out. Do you know the area?
Yeah, it covers all the way to the river. But what they're working on too is that some of those species they're found in all different areas. So they're going to look at where those species are that might be in the way of the bikes, and find another one somewhere else. Like, so that the new map it'll still have all the species, but they'll be in their different locations, so that those bikes won't go through there. They'll go. I think they're having a beginners, an intermediate, and an advanced bike track at 3 different loops, and there might be a sand flat here that's earmarked in the arid land gardens, but there's another sand flat here, so that they might change that one because it's in the way of that bike. They're working together on it anyway.
Well, I haven't been part of it at all, but Councillor Rogers is interested observer through the Arid Botanical Gardens, and obviously as Deputy Mayor as well.
So yeah, they're working working together to just form the least, the least interaction that they can get, and then they'll have signage up. So there'll be more botanical gardens on the other side of one track, so they'll have signage up to say, beware of bikes, and the bikes beware of pedestrians.
Now, I'm not privy to what this advice is, but I'm not aware of any plans to exclude the livestock from any of those
And
areas.
the livestock will still be in there as well.
Like, I mean, and if people were to say, oh, people riding bikes, well, I don't know, a common in Western Queensland where there's not 25 230cc motorbikes going full Becky all weekend anyway, so that's happening now. So, it's just there's going to be signs there. So, but anyway, we'll see what advice comes out of that when it comes to council.
Mr Mayor, similar to the rec park, we might need to develop an operational plan just to say that, so if it's around town common time, muster time, that the Barkey Red is closed, as an example.
Is that part of the document development recommendations from a risk management point of view, that some sort of operational plan be developed? Is that there?
Yeah, definitely have to have an operational plan.
And vice versa, if the Arrowlands have a weekend for bushwalking or bird spotting, that it's closed, and vice versa. If there's a Barkey Reds trail weekend on, then it's notified and closed for the Arrow Garden.
Very good. Any more? We're at the planning and development report. Sorry, the economic development report. Yes, sorry, so we're finished with no more questions on economic development? Right. Can I have somebody move to receive the workplace health and safety report 355? Councillor Arthur, second Councillor Gleeson, those in favour? Carried 7-0. Incidents? Questions? No questions? 356. Yes, it's both of you, councillors Peoples and Roddy. Can I have somebody move to the report? Yes, somebody move, please. We receive it. Move Councillor Hanson, seconded Councillor Gleeson. Is in favour? 5-0. Okay. Questions? New report format?
Yes, Mr Mayor, as you can see, as flagged last time, we separated the plans into a separate document from the other capital projects. And we've separated out the committed plan from the actual money spent.
Sorry, I was looking for you. There you go. It's stolen Paula's seat.
So with the plant, we're basically on budget, total budget for the year. And with the capital projects, we've spent 53% of our budget.
Just in terms of the expended within budget, overspent in regards to budget, overspent but within the budget limitations. commentary. I then, and I know we're going to discuss the globe in a moment with respect to tender evaluation, but the money spent to date, even though it's within the nominal figure for the project, is actually overspent in regards to budget. Is that correct? Because it's non-recoverable funding. So what we spent there is actually outside the scope of the fund. So even though we're nowhere near the 1.5, it's that, there's a portion of that that's actually overspent. Which I can totally appreciate will be almost impossible to really, the levels of columns we're going to have in this would be over the top if we were trying to pull that in, but that's one that I draw attention to. The last figure you just gave is the probably concerning one, that we're 50% expended and we're 75% of the way through the year, or but.
Mr Mayor, our special operating costs is even worse, it's got 36% spent, if I read that correctly, when we're 75% of the way through the year. Have we, through you Mr Mayor, have we got an idea of what projects of those are unlikely to happen this year, or we're likely to start some, all, or?
Oh, which?
Oh, well, both budgets.
Well, probably, if you go to special operating, the Economic Development Board probably won't happen this year. The economic development, so we've got that 180,000 that this will be contingency fund.
It's not actually earmarked for a project, so it might.
Yeah, that's okay. No, but just with our upcoming budget meetings, if we know that we've got projects that were budgeted for this year, and we're now happy to move the money into next year's budget.
Where we can.
Well, where we can, or if we know that the budget can be moved, the project can be moved and the budget adjusted, just so that when we do our budget workshop,
Yeah.
we've
But basically the intention is to spend the money that's been allocated. In all those ones, in the capital projects.
What about the reservoir cleaning? Sorry, just hold on that. Sorry, Brett. Rick, is that likely to occur? That?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Yeah.
Contractors are on that one.
Beautiful. So there's a big chunk of that.
Yeah.
There's 100 grand. Others as such that, so if you put the 100 grand out of that and the 148 from the regional board, that significantly switches 36% pretty quick.
Yeah.
So it's, that one's probably okay, but let's go back to the big list. This is the one that could be different.
The community housing, 200,000. So we've only we've got the quotes, we sent them to, or in the process of sending them to the department. They will come back with an offer, which may take more than 12 months before we hear from them. So I would suggest that under governance, community housing, that money won't be spent. 200,000. One of ours that's been done.
Just on the Alpha Community Care, is that 100% completed? I know it's 100% spent. Is there any more costs to go there?
Mayor, I just, I know we've put in for a new budget on what we do with the car park at the back of Curtin Channel, and maybe just a car forward for a show.
So just in terms of what we've already spent, sorry, what is there any more bills that have to to be done, or is it's done? That you're putting in for the next stage, but for that stage it's finished. Well, I just want to congratulate officers, because to come in $263 over budget on a better than $500,000 project is feathering every officer who's worked on that project. Now, I know we did significantly amend the budget for that at tender approval, but it meant there wasn't budget creep happen after we awarded it. So to every officer involved in that, congratulations. Sorry, Brett, I interrupted. Keep going.
The Globe, what happens there, that project's, has an October completion date, so definitely won't spend all that before June. Roads will be done, footpaths. Now that, some of those footpaths have a 30th of June 22 finish date, so no acquittal date, so some of that money may get carried over. There's no urgency to get them done by 30th of June. The runway reseal and Barkey, we've applied for a grant for that, so we're just holding off. If we get funded, hopefully the grant will pay for it, will pay for some of it. All the workshop stuff is being done. The solar is at tender, vendor panel stage. Jenny, is that not closed yet?
James Smith has closed and there were no expressions of interest. So we'll just go out to we can now go out to approach companies.
Water treatment plants in Alpha and Jericho, Rick's working on that with contractors to try and get those repairs done. I don't know if all that will be spent, Rick.
The safety access stuff we're going to then have very shortly.
SCADA and telemetry definitely won't be spent on this financial year. So that's being funded through the loan, so then once again it's not a 30th of June deadline to spend that. Things we do have a deadline is the sewage treatment plant stage 1 and 2 and the water reuse. Those projects do require that money to be spent. So that's what we're urgently working on, trying to get that underway. Flood mitigation to be determined. The waste landfills, that has to be, the Markle one has to be spent by the 30th of June. Town fences, or Mudborough is done. Barkey is in the process. This pool stuff is being done, those disability access water parks. So Aramac amenities is all but complete. So message boards are on order, tramway museum's done. So really the only items are community housing, that won't be, council money that won't be done. Is the community housing. The airport resale. And we need to determine what to do with the solar. terms of plant, the only ones that we did defer with the bus, so we had 100,000 for the parking bus. So that's deferred. Everything else is progress.
So, that bottom right-hand figure for the plan, or $1,100 within budget, but we are so that's everything's done except the bus. Is that what I'm hearing? With the bus deferred, we're $1,000 within what we budgeted for ourselves. Is that right?
Yes. And there are more, we do have a plant going up for sale in the next ASCO auction,
Right.
so that will come in as well as an extra income.
Because I was about to ask, so we're substantially within budget on so many items there, and then, yeah, but if we had put the bus up, we'd have been way over. But there's still more trades or more sales to be applied.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Any more purchases?
The only ones there's a couple of, they're all committed, I think, so it's all been put in as committed costs, so they've all been ordered, but we haven't actually paid for them. So obviously those committed costs are not guaranteed, but.
So the water truck for Aramac. What's the go there?
It's ordered.
I know. How long till it arrives?
Not sure.
Can we find out? Because it will make a difference for our budget next year, whether council's original statement of budget last year was that we purchased one this year and phased them in, or effectively we're going to purchase two in 1 year if it's not going to turn up until June.
Because the Alpha one hasn't turned up yet, has it?
No, it's there, Mr. Mayor.
With the cockerel, the tank for cockerel.
Oh, no, not the tank, God, just the new one.
The new.
Right mover.
Prime mover and
Yep.
water carts there.
Prime mover.
And the water cart.
Yeah. Yes. So that one's arrived after, yes, that, but the Alpha is also getting a body truck with a tank and a cockerel, same as Aramac, neither of those have turned up.
Yeah, but the other one for Alpha's nothing new. It's just a trade. They had a water, that chipper that's there had a water truck on it. It's that Aramac one that is the transition to be
Yes.
to a water
That's
tank.
right.
Okay, any other questions on plan or capital projects?
Getting back to the water truck, Mr. Mayor, why is it taking 8 months? Why is it taking so long to order a truck and a tank?
Well, I don't know how long they've been ordered for, but arrival might be more pertinent question. Is there a, is that,
Takes at least 6 months. Major plan.
So,
It takes at least 6 months for any major plan item.
yeah.
And with COVID, I know it's an excuse, but everyone uses, but to get supplies from overseas, it has delayed a lot of procurement.
but I guess the question Councillor Bess is asking, and I'll ask it anyway, and if it's not what he's asking, did we promptly place the order? So is it a delay from order to product to them arriving, or have we dragged the chain on ordering that stuff?
Yes. I'll have to check the dates.
Okay.
No, Mr. Mayor, can I just also to you, Brett, I see there's some zero turn hours here, and
couple of the men from the men's shed have spoken to me and asked that if there's a small zero turnover friendly trade agreement that they have from, and these people aren't on the Facebook or on the options, they don't have that facility, so we could just keep the men's shed in mind. They're looking for an off. Please.
So that'd be a community donation of planning, there would be a resolution for council to do that. But we've done that by donation. So, councillor, if they wrote to the CEO and watched that, we had the opportunity, and if you just bring it to a meeting.
He did suggest that he did send an email through to the council, but it hasn't been replied to or anything, so we just.
Can you just check which officer he sent it to?
Yeah.
So that they can check and see if it's there, and if not, resend it, so that it can be formally. It's not so much formally, it's just if it's in the system, then the officers go, oh yeah, we've got two of them going up for auction, we'll give them the best one.
Yeah, that's what I suggested.
Well, not give it to them, recommend to council that we do that.
But, and as I said, that they're not in that age group where they've got internet and computers in the men's shed, so I will take it back and get them to send an email through to you, so see.
Yep. Mr. Mayor, the Alpha truck was ordered on the 21st of August.
Aaron. It is a long time. So that's the one that's been delivered or the one that's waiting?
It's on the way.
6 months. More than 6 months.
Do they just coast along because they
4
think
days
it's
gone, it's 7 months. Sorry.
Do they just poke along slowly because they think it's council?
Oh, don't forget that in that 6 months is a month where the world stops.
I think new car deliveries, Mr Mayor, are strained or have been for the last 6 to 8 months. I know there's wait lists on, especially to Audis.
See, JobKeeper's been so invaluable in this country, but it has not. It has meant that if production is slow, sales in certain areas are lower than the corresponding quarter the year before, so the government kept picking up the wage bill. So much stuff's going to get faster after JobKeeper stops. Meat works went to split shifts as a result. There's a lot of extenuating factors in this period of time. And just supply of steel out of China has been significantly delayed. So not all of that steel, but the body, for example, has got to be manufactured from steel. So.
Aaron Gates, October.
So that's 6 months as well.
Just one of the orders. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? We could invite the external councillors or external.
Okay.
Might somebody move you're staying for the finance? It's not next, is it? That's the only thing. Got one on the that shouldn't take long. 357 minutes of the Barcaldine Regional Council Wildlife Destination Advisory Committee being accepted. Moved Councillor Peoples, second Councillor Hanson. Those in favour, 6-0, as Councillor Gleeson is out of the room. Any questions or comments? Councillor Hanson, anything to raise?
Through you, Mr Mayor, there was talk of actually getting some meat donated, which will decrease the expense of actually terminating mating quite considerably. I'm not sure where they've actually got to on that. As one of the property owners said he could donate the meat, and I think it was the council may have to supply a couple of blokes to go over and cut it up and bring it back. I think that was the only cost to us.
Have you had any conversation?
I have asked a few questions about it, and I just need to delve in a little bit more deeply to find out if we can actually accept it from the source that's delivering it to us. And then there's also a number of workplace health and safety considerations that we need to think about before we actually allow our officers to cut up the meat, and that from a variety of health and safety risks there. So I would imagine they would outweigh the benefits that we would get from using the meat.
What if landowners were prepared to cut it up for themselves?
I did ask that question of the person that raised it with me, and he informed me that they wouldn't have time to do that activity themselves.
You mean cut it up for their own use, Mr Mayor?
Yeah.
That,
Okay, so my advice would be, until 3 years ago, the only banana bait that I've ever thrown out, I've cut up myself, so. Okay.
In order to go through you, Mr Mayor, that the actual property owners themselves went over and collected the meat and cut it up for their own use.
Yeah, because I can understand that points Anna's raised, definitely from Lloyd, but if the landowners, I understand so there is a difference in the eastern part to the west of our council areas in that during the drought and restricted numbers of stock, there's probably not the disposable stock laying around to undertake 1080, a lot of, if you've got a lot of, lamed or a diseased animal, well, that's often the animal that was used for cutting up the 1080 bait, but it's the single biggest cost in the wild dog 1080 baiting campaign is purchasing meat, and it's growing in expense. So landowners, I think, definitely need to, if it's possible, if they can receive meat and cut it up, I think that there should be some goodwill or contribution where possible from them to assist in that respect, because
Mr Mayor, on I don't understand that at all, because everything I've had to do with 1080 baiting is we've cut the meat up and the council officer has come and injected the meat.
until very recently that was the case, but then we undertook procurement of the meat and we bring the meat and then inject it on arrival, and the producer would just take there.
Yeah.
But yes, and like until very recently that was the case, like 3 or 4 years, producers had to provide their own meat.
And our officers injected the meat. We had to have a 1080 officer who was licensed to handle the 1080 and inject the meat.
Yeah, that still is the case. They're the only ones in Queensland who can do it. There's 3 officers in our council area. They're still the only ones who can inject it.
This is
about getting bulk sites and then cutting it up.
This is only for the 2 campaigns a year where we could purchase the meat. If you want to bait outside that, you supply your own meat.
But we never used to do any of it.
Well, both regional council is.
Well, until 3 years ago, Brett, it certainly never happened in Division 9. For 30 years I've done nothing but cut it up. So it may have, in certain areas we may have provided the meat, but it's not an historical thing, it's not that long ago. But it started en masse, and looking at the costs in that, cost to us over the last few years, I mean, it's massive.
We lived in the Winton Council for a time, and you had to supply your own meat. All council would supply would be the officer to inject. You had to supply your own meat.
I'm not advocating.
No, I know you're explaining, but
We have purchased meat
for a while.
I believe every year that I've been.
Can I, the other question I've got is, how do we have a workplace health and safety issue, because it's what our men cutting up meat and the danger of a knife?
Yeah. Oh, shooting the kids,
like potential diseases.
The source of the meat, which is not written there what the source of the meat is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I understand the concept of not having time, but I think producers, when they're getting everything given to them, need to accept a responsibility for contributing to the process. All they're doing now is driving around throwing out meat that Barcaldine Regional Council pays for and pays to inject. I'm with you, Councillor Hanson. I think there should be some consideration by the landholders backed by that committee. My advice to them would be councils continuing to partake in this, and there could be some, CEO's obviously investigating what we can do, but there definitely needs to be some stakeholder engagement here, not just turn up and pick up a bucket of meat and drive out with it.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the meat is the largest cost from what I've seen, and if we can cut those costs, it's better for us.
Correct, and moving forward, the supply of 1080 is not actually guaranteed outside of this next 12 months. So if we can minimise our meat supply costs when we get to an arrangement where the 1080's got to be actually procured at cost, council might be able to offset its action, may not need to increase its budget to still provide 1080. If there's a greater acceptance that stakeholders and provide the meat or assist with the provision of meat. And as I stated, I know there'll be some areas that will struggle with that, especially while it's dry and stock numbers are low. But if there's an opportunity, I don't think all the responsibility on this should always rest on council. If stakeholders can.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, I definitely agree that. I think the landowners need to step up a little bit. Yeah.
One of the RLOs has reported a bit of a drop-off in the baiting activity. Was that discussed?
It was, I believe, through Mr Mayor.
Regionally, I can report that that's not the case. So text from DAF has said that kilograms of meat in the adjoining shires has been on par with other years, but he did share the RLA's concern that there's just been there has been a noticeable drop-off in meat distribution here. We theorised, Tex and I did, that could be as a percentage of our council area. There is a significant, larger percentage of our council area, perhaps behind fence than may be the case in other areas. So that once they're fenced out and trapped out and shot out, well, landowners may be able to legitimately reduce the need to bait. It may not be a factor that concerns them. So it might, that's a theory that will need to be rigorously tested. Nothing further?
Mr Mayor, was also raised about the cost of fencing, and they wanted, the committee wanted to apply for funding for building better regions for more fencing.
Did they?
Sorry?
Did they?
They wanted council to apply for on their behalf.
Through you, Mr Mayor, another, I was just going to ask, that was directly put into the council, wasn't it? Yeah, can you do the homework? I feel as though that the council, by all means, should help. We've got to help, but as you were saying before, landowners got to look after their own interests as well.
So there's the Federal Pest and Weeds Initiative, which will be going through another iteration over the next budget cycle. That would be a more appropriate funding application for council to submit on behalf of the region if there was still the interest. The expressions of interest for cluster fencing were still high. There's also a further $4 million in state funding that has actually not been allocated. It's been determined that it may not be for cluster fencing, but it hasn't excluded it. So there's still money up there in that space that I would think the Building Better Regions Fund application that council submitted probably a better fit for the community than
Yeah, that competes against what else we want to do as a council.
the pool.
Yeah.
And the federal, that other, the peril. Peril
I nearly just speak.
Funding suits the wildlife fencing. So, but the problem we had last time is we didn't have the information from the landholders. So once again, they need to provide the information so we can get that, to be ready for that application when it comes in or when it opens, so we can get it done. I think the Queensland one came out today.
In Schedule 2, I haven't seen it.
Queensland Federal Pest Initiative, round 6. So that's open today, closed 28th of April.
A month. Slightly more. Okay. Councillor Hanson or Gleeson, anything further from that meeting to report?
I think I missed it.
So Alan's got it. Well, you're following up on an issue there anyway, already, with what, around meat provision. And there's probably just a broader conversation producers need to step up, is, the assessment of some people in the room anyway. It would certainly help council do more in that space if we were spending less on meat. We could spend more on other initiatives.
Mr. Mayor, I've noted for the budget workshop in 2 weeks. For discussion.
358, Regional Council Audit. Vote. Problem. Councillor Peoples, seconded. Gleeson, any questions? Councillor Plum, comments? Right,
Well, it's mainly all in, the news there, that's, in there, asset valuation is a fairly big, probably list item. Otherwise, fair bit of work there for our staff to, get everything into some, down on track.
Thanks, councillor Plum. Has anyone got any other further comments or questions?
It's already been moved.
Yeah, my mouse is at work.
Yeah, I got it. My keyboard isn't working, so I'm just answering on the paper, sorry.
So we'll move on to 3.5.9.
Would you like to break lunch?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I don't think there was a call of all in favour or not for the last.
Yes. Oh, we didn't have in favour on that hearing. So was everyone in favour of that audit committee, the 3.5.8? Did we have a mover and a seconder?
Yeah,
So
so moved, councillor Peoples, seconded, councillor Gleeson.
So
Just
is everyone in
vote.
favour?
Everyone
6. Sorry, that was done. So
Six,
might break for lunch now.